Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to G Bear's Off-Grid Ways, a homestead in the desert. This is July 22nd, 2019, and I'll get outside and show you some other things, but I want to get to this electric first. If I have to, I'll show you the other ones in a separate video. I'll do a part 2 tonight, and I'll put that in there. But you see the sky over here is pretty dark. This is the monsoonal moisture they were talking about coming in, and it did run a few sprinkles across me a little while ago. Nothing to even count on. I mean, a couple of spots on the windshield, and that was about it. Although the little few drops that hit me felt good, nice and cool. All right, so here we are in the battery room. And I'm going to do electricity, off-grid electricity 201.1. This is the start of your upgraded electrical training. All right. This goes out to especially Forever North Sanctuary, North. Pay attention here. I'm going to teach you something. All right, number one. I notice that you like to go through this controller and you keep pushing these buttons. And you're saying, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. You know what? That's because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. You don't need to know all of that stuff unless you're really into this stuff. You're not. You just want your system to work, so that's where you're going to be. All right, we're showing 13.3 volts. That's the main mode right there. Let me get closer so you can see the modes. Those are the modes you're going to go through every time you push the button. Okay, so the only thing that you need to concern yourself with is right here, the main screen. The main screen is showing that I'm taking in on my solar panels, my solar array is putting in 13.2 volts. That's what's coming from the solar to the batteries. Okay, now remember one thing. The solar panels do not run your equipment. All they do is charge batteries. The batteries run your equipment. You cannot have a solar system without a battery bank going straight into your equipment. It won't work. Okay, you just can't do that. Now houses are different. They have a grid tie is a completely different thing than what we're doing out here. This is off grid. I've got to have a battery bank because no electric company supplies me electric. All my electric comes from my battery bank here. As you can see, I've got 18 batteries here. I wanted 20. But I've got 18 now. I still need 2 more. Well, we'll see what I do, whether I take the 2 more of these or if I change my whole battery bank over when it comes time. All right, so let's get back to it. The only thing you concern yourself with is how much volts is being put in to your batteries by your solar panels. You don't need to drive yourself nuts with all the other figures. This right here will tell you everything else you need to know. Because you remember, there's that formula. Okay, that's watts equals volts times amps. Okay, watts is your power. That's everything that you have. How much power it consumes is rated in watts. Like a light bulb. A light bulb is rated at 60 watts, say. Okay, so when you turn that light bulb on, it's going to require 60 watts at 120 volts. So you divide, oh God, there's a fly bothering the heck out of me. He knows my hands are busy. Okay, so you're going to take the watts and divide it by the 120 volts, and that's going to tell you how many amps it uses. But you don't need to know that stuff. It's not going to make any difference in what you're doing. Your main thing you need to know is your watts. So, get yourself one of these meters. And I know North has one. I told him to get one years ago, and I think he did get it. Okay, this is a kilowatt meter. Now this thing, you plug it in to your output. Like say if I plugged it into that outlet right there, then it would start giving me a reading of how much electricity is coming out of this unit. How many volts and so forth. But it's not going to show how many amps or watts are being used because there's nothing plugged in here. So you plug this into a wall outlet let's go out here a second, like this, okay? You would take this and plug this into a wall outlet, and you'll see the numbers are going to boot up on that, and it's showing 118.8 volts. Now that's what I want to see. 120 volts, 110 to 120 volts is what you want to run all your AC. Okay, now if I plug another apparatus, a refrigerator, a fan, an air conditioner, whatever, if I plug it into here, then I can change by the watts. I hit watts, and it'll tell me how many watts that unit uses when I turn it on. That's what you want to know. So you're going to take this meter and you're going to go around to every item, every electrical item at 120 volts that you're going to be using in your cabin or your off-grid location. Okay, and you do that each time to each one. Now, note this. If you're running something off an extension cord, you cannot plug this in here, plug the extension cord into here, and then get a proper reading for what that unit down the line is using, because it's going to consider the cord as a resistance. So you don't want to do that. Okay, you want to plug this into the other end of the extension cord and then plug the item into this. And then you're going to check your watts. Don't worry about checking amps. Don't worry about checking your hertz. Don't worry about checking kilowatt hours. You don't need to know that. All you need to know are what your watts are, what your power usage is going to be for every item you're going to be running in your cabin. Okay? And that includes if you want to plug in an electric drill. So you're going to plug the electric drill into this item, and you're going to see how many watts that requires. Okay, now you're going to take all those watts and you're going to put them on a piece of paper. You're going to say TV, 1.2 watts, refrigerator, 130 watts. Okay, light bulb, LED light bulb, 5 watts. You're going to put all of that. Now you're going to add up your wattage down the line. Okay, once you get a total on that total wattage, now you got to figure out how many hours a day you're going to run that. So let's say that your refrigerator has got to run 24 hours a day. No, it doesn't. But you got to figure it for that. That gives you extra, so you don't have to worry about it. So you're going to take 24 hours times the watts, and that's how many watt hours you're going to have to require. Okay, math is going to confuse you. So let's take a simple route here. You're going to take total watts of everything you have. Now you got to get your solar panels. You're using 12 volts, so you're going to use 12 volt panels. 100 watt panels are what most people buy. So let's say your total is 600 watts of usage for everything that you're going to run in your cabin. Okay, that's what you came out with when you added them all up. So you're going to go out and buy your panels, and you're going to buy double that. 1200 watts. Why? Because you have to charge your batteries too. Okay, and your batteries are going to be running that 600 watts. So while the sun is out, the 600 watts that's being pulled out of these batteries is being equalized by what the sun is putting back in. And it's charging the batteries with the other 600 watts that's out there. And if you have a cloudy day, you definitely want to make sure you have that much. So, how many batteries do you need? All right, North said that he has 4 batteries, I think. And he said there were 440 amp hours each. All right, so how do we figure out how many watts he's got? Well, first of all, remember, when you hook batteries in parallel, that's going positive to positive to positive to positive, negative to negative to negative to negative. When you hook them in that way, your voltage remains the same. So you still have 12 volts even though you have 4 batteries hooked up in parallel. It's still only 12 volts, but your amps increase. So it would be 440, 440, 440, 440 if they were 4 separate 12 volt batteries. but he's like me. He's using 6-volt batteries. So what we do is we tie those in series parallel. Okay, so in series, you go from positive to negative of the other battery, and two 6-volt batteries now become one 12-volt battery, because now you have a positive here and a negative there. Okay, so what that does is it increases your voltage by tying them in series, but it does not increase your amperage. So this one was 440 and this one was 440, but they were both 6 volts. By doing this series parallel, you only increase the voltage. That puts you up to 12 volts for two 6-volt batteries, and you still are at 440 amp hours. So let's take 4 batteries he's got. So he's got 440 amp hours, 440 amp hours. So now he's got 880 amp hours. So he can divide that or multiply that times 12. That's amps times volts. And that's going to tell you how many watts he can run off those 4 batteries. Okay, now think about that. 12 times 880. That's a lot. That's 8,000 watts. Okay, that's 8,000 watts. But remember, 12 volts is only 1/10 of 120 volts. So when you're going to step that up through an inverter, you're only going to have 1/10 of the power here coming out of this. All right, so you're looking at 800 watts. So with 800 watts of power coming out of his inverter, and he's only required to run 600 watts for the day, he's got 200 watts to spare. He doesn't need to turn this thing on and off all day long. That hurts these units. You don't want to turn them on and off unless you have to. That's for maintenance. You leave them on all the time. Okay, so it's a pain in the neck because you can't power these down when something's plugged in and running. You've got to unplug everything from it. Now I've got mine hardwired into an electrical panel. So we're going to go there now. Okay, electrical panels. On the back of this inverter, this is what they call a grid tie inverter. See, and that's what you want, even if you're going to be off grid. Don't let it confuse you. You want this to go into an electrical panel because now you've eliminated the need for fuses everywhere. Fuses that blow on you in the middle of the night at the worst possible moment. Now you've got a breaker panel. If anything's going to happen, the breaker's going to pop. You go over and you reset the breaker. Then you find out why it popped. If you reset it and it pops again instantly, you've got a direct short somewhere. So now you can start disconnecting items one at a time and turn the breaker back on and find out what item is shorting out and what item is causing it to pop. All right? So you notice I use 6-gauge wire here. That's the largest that would fit in here. And I have 2 of each color. The reds are one hot line, the blacks are the other hot line, and your whites are your neutral line. Okay, so in your electrical panel, I just happen to have a picture here of the one I put in my container. Okay, this is what they call a 2-space. It's got room for 2 space, but yeah, you see 3 breakers here. That's because you could put a stack breaker in here. Okay, or you could put 2 stack breakers. It's only a 2-space panel, but you could have 4 breakers if you want. Okay, I have no need for it at this point, so I put 15 amp in, which is lighting circuit, and I put 2 20 amps in to run all of my power tools, one on one side of the wall and one on the other side of the wall, down the container. I have this little plug right beside it. That's always a good idea, because if you have to do any work around here and you need to plug your drill in or whatever, you got electricity right there to do it with. All right, so here's what I would do in North's situation where he keeps blowing fuses. Get rid of the fuses. This is a Murray panel. Okay, it's called a 2-space 125 amp sub panel by Murray, M-U-R-R-A-Y. Okay, you buy them at Home Depot, or they're around $14 or $15 for the panel. The breakers don't come with it. You buy those separate. Now, a stack breaker is going to be about $10. whether it's 220s or a 1520, it's going to be about 10 bucks. A single pole 20 amp breaker, which is a standard breaker to run a certain item or stuff in your house, your outlets in your house, is a 20 amp breaker. Those are around $4.50 each. Okay, so you can get this whole thing for about 25 bucks. Now, take yourself a short 12 gauge extension cord, go to Harbor Freight and buy one, or order one online. Get one that's about, I'll say, 15 feet long. Cut it right in the middle. All right? Cut it right in the middle. All right, now, the side that has the male plug on, which would be like this extension cord with the male plug, okay, that's going to come into your panel, and you're going to strip the ends. You'll have 3 wires there. You'll have normally a black, a white, and a green. Okay, so your black is going to go to one of these pins right here, one of these lugs. Now you have 2 lugs in this system because you have 2 sides of the panel. So you're coming out of a regular main panel like I am. I have 240 volts. There's 120 in this one, 120 in this one, 240 volts. Okay, so now what's going to happen is you're only got 1 wire coming in. So you can take a jumper and run it across to the other one and just jump it across there. Now you've got both sides of your panel powered up. You don't have 240 volts, you only have 120 volts. But now you can put a 20 amp breaker in here and a 20 amp breaker in here. Now you have 2 separate breakers. Now, if you're coming off of your grid tie inverter, you'll have 2 lines coming in. So the reds would go to one side, the blacks would go to the other side. The whites go to the neutral bar, and on this panel, the neutral bar and the ground bar are one and the same. And they did that a lot in the older electrical panels in houses. And now they have the neutral bar is an isolated bar separate from the panel. It actually has a insulator between it and the metal box, and that's for your neutrals, because power does run through a neutral. But when you don't have that, you can run your grounds to the same bar. Okay, so you see my whites and my greens are all on this neutral bar now. So here's my 2 hots coming in, 120, 120, and there's the neutral coming in, and there's the ground coming in. All right, so now you take the other half of your extension cord, the one with the female end on it. You're going to strip the wires so you have enough wire to fit inside here, and you're going to put the black wire onto the screw on the breaker. Make sure your breaker is shut off when you do that. You can even pull the breaker out of there and make it easier to put it in and tighten the screw. So you're going to put the black wire into your breaker. Your white wire is going to go up into the bar. Your ground wire is going to go into the bar. All right, that's it. Now you're going to have a female plug sticking out of one of these holes after you take the knockout out, and you can plug your apparatus into that. Now you can take that 15 amp strip that you have, power strip, and just because it's a 15 amp power strip does not mean that it produces 15 amps. It just means that it will handle up to 15 amps of power. If you plug in more than 15 amps of power into there, like a giant air conditioning unit that uses 25 amps, you're going to blow that thing sky high. All right, so don't be confused by ratings of amps here, amps there, and all of that stuff. Forget all that. Remember, total up all your watts for everything you're going to run, and then set your solar panel so you have twice as many watts as that, so you can charge your batteries and run your stuff while the sun's out off of that. Now remember, when the sun sets, your batteries are going to take over and be running without any charge. So they're going to discharge through the night and they're going to drop down. As long as you don't go below, I tell people 12.0, but if you get down to 11.8, 11.9, you're still fine. You could start a car with that amount of voltage. So don't worry about it. There's still plenty going into this unit. This only takes 12 volts coming in. All right, so the 12 volts coming in is putting 120 volts out. You don't care whether it's 12 volts or 12.3. Your batteries care. So you want to try to keep those batteries up in the above the 12.0 mark whenever possible. If at night it does run down a little bit below 12.0, don't worry about it. Your batteries aren't going to be dead unless they drop down below 10.6. Okay, so don't worry about it. You'll be fine. So I hope that cleared things up. If you have any questions about that, feel free to post them down in the comment section, and I'll see if I can't get answers to you. I know there's a lot to remember here, but of course, the great thing about these videos is you can go back through them, you can pause, you can write down your information, and you can move on and rewatch it a couple of times if you fail to understand it the first time. It takes a little time, but once it's in your head and you know what you're doing, that's all that matters. So remember, especially you North, all you need to remember is your watts, your total watts, twice as many solar panels as that, and your batteries, your 4 batteries, if they are 440, I think you said they were 440 each. So out of four 6-volt batteries tied in series parallel, you're going to have 880 amp hours times 12 volts, which is like well over 9,000 volts. 9,000 watts, and then divide that by 10, because that's what you're going to get for your 120 volts. So you're going to have plenty of watts coming out to run your refrigerator or your freezer and that stuff. The plugging in and unplugging and flipping on and flipping off of the inverter all the time, the surges from that are causing your high voltage outputs, and you're causing your fuses to blow. Okay, now remember one other thing. On the back side of this thing, there is a ground lug down at the bottom down there, and you see the bare wire running off, no pun intended. The bare wire runs off there, and you see it comes over here. That goes in, and that's tied to the ground bar in my electrical panel inside. But it also runs from the panel, it runs down and goes outside, and I drove a ground rod in the ground. Now, ideally, you want to be 6 foot deep with a ground rod for residential, and 8 foot deep for commercial, sometimes 2 ground rods required for some commercial, industrial, or 2 or more. But you don't have to worry about that. If anything, get yourself a piece of rebar, 4 feet long, 3 foot long. Drive that into the ground and hook a ground wire to it. You'd be better off with that than with nothing, okay? It's not going to be up to code, but you're better off having some type of an earth ground than you are not having one at all. All right. That's it for today, everybody. I'm going to step out here and I'm going to show you a few other things that I wanted to show you. You remember my method I showed back in videos prior, how to sprout seeds rapidly. Okay, here's my corn seeds. Okay, and now instead of using a flat piece of plastic, I found that these plastic trays that you get fish and meat on in the market, if you clean them out, put a paper towel in the bottom, lay your seeds on top of there, and put them inside of a Ziploc bag, but don't zip it up. And then set it in a indirect light area where the sun doesn't hit directly on it. You can sprout seeds rapidly. These are my corn. I have 2 of each, so there's going to be 40 stalks of corn out of this whole thing. Okay, so how long did it take to sprout them? Well, I put them in on 7/20, 2 days ago, and they're already sprouted. Okay, so within the next couple of days, these are going to be ready to go into the ground. Once they hit the soil and the nutrients in the soil, they're going to pop up, and I'm going to have ears, stalks of corn and more ears of corn growing, and I'll get a second crop in this year. So I wanted to show you that. The other thing, I did pick up 2 more totes today. I got them on my trailer. Those are going to be my rain capture units. They're going to sit right here about the W. I'm going to have to blow some paint on the wall there behind them before I set them up on a cinder block pedestal off the ground with storage space underneath them so I don't waste any space. And I'll have that area painted behind them so I don't have to move them later to paint the container when I do that. So that's what I'm going to do with that stuff. I've got to set those up with a manifold on them with 1-inch pipe coming out the bottoms, tying them together, coming into one hose connection, which I can run a hose down to those totes when I need to, drain the rainwater off of here down to my garden house. So that's all for irrigation. Okay, the other thing is, yesterday, showing you the batteries. Remember, this battery is an AGM, and it has no memory effect. That means if you only half charge it and then use it, it's not going to remember that next time you go to charge it. It's going to take a full charge. So these are good. They're valve regulated, spill-proof, sealed. Okay? So that means that you can lop them over on the side and you're not going to get battery acid all over the place. Good way to go. All right. That's about all I have for now. Don't forget, have any questions, leave them down in the comment section. I'll get back to you ASAP. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up down there. Yeah, thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Don't forget to share with your friends, family, neighbors, Facebook friends, anybody you want to share with. Send them a copy of my video. Say, hey, check this guy out. He's a nut. Hey, wait a minute. I'm not really nut. Well, maybe I am. I eat a lot of pistachios. All right. That's about all for today. G-Bear, thanking you all for joining me and signing off.